Hey guys, welcome to RedSunStories. Hope you're doing well. Tonight, the ocean calls a fisherman with promises of wonder. What he found in the depths was more beautiful and more terrible than he ever imagined. So, before you get comfortable, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments what time it is for you. I would love to connect with you guys. Now, let's dive into tonight's story together. The sea remembers everything. It holds every whisper, every prayer, every soul that has ever stood at its edge and gazed into its depths. On a desolate stretch of coastline where volcanic rock meets cold water, where mist clings to the shore like a shroud, there once lived a fisherman named Urashima Taro. His village was small, forgotten by the world, nestled between mountains that seemed to lean inward, as if to hide the settlement from the sun itself. The beach where he walked was not soft sand, but sharp stones that clicked beneath his feet, a constant reminder that beauty here came with edges, with warnings. The sky above this place was rarely clear. Clouds gathered like old memories, gray and heavy, releasing rain that felt more like tears than water. The wind carried salt and something else, something ancient, something that made even the bravest fishermen pull their nets early and return to hearths that never quite warmed their bones. But Urashima Taro was different. He did not fear the sea. He did not fear solitude. Perhaps he should have. Every morning before dawn, when darkness still pressed against the world, Urashima would rise from his small cottage. The structure was simple: bamboo walls, a thatched roof that whispered in the wind, a single room where he slept on a thin mat. He owned little. His fishing rod was his father's, the bamboo worn smooth by decades of hands. His nets were mended more times than he could count, thread upon thread creating patterns that told stories of patient nights. His boat was barely more than a hollowed log, sturdy enough to brave the shallow waters but never meant for the deep ocean that stretched beyond the rocky barrier reef. Urashima was young, though his eyes held the weariness of someone much older. His face was weathered by salt and sun, his hands rough from rope and fish scales. He lived alone. His parents had passed when he was still a boy, taken by fever one harsh winter. His siblings had left the village, seeking fortune in distant cities where the emperor's gold flowed like water. But Urashima remained. The sea called to him in ways he could not explain, in ways that made leaving impossible, even when his stomach ached with hunger, even when his cottage grew cold. The villagers spoke little to him. They saw his solitude as strangeness, his dedication to the unforgiving water as madness. They would nod when he passed, their eyes sliding away, their whispers following him like shadows. "He spends too much time at sea," they would say. "The ocean will claim him one day. Mark our words." But Urashima did not listen. He could not. The waves spoke louder than any human voice, their rhythm a heartbeat he understood better than his own. On this particular morning, the one where everything would change, the sky hung lower than usual. Storm clouds massed on the horizon like gathering armies, their bellies dark with unreleased rain. The air tasted metallic, charged with electricity that made his skin prickle. Most fishermen would stay ashore on such a day, mending their nets by the fire, telling stories to chase away the gloom. But Urashima felt pulled toward the water with an urgency he had never experienced before. It was as if invisible threads wrapped around his chest, tugging him forward, demanding he answer a summons he did not consciously hear. He dragged his boat across the stones, the scraping sound lost in the wind's howl. The water was dark, almost black, reflecting nothing of the sky. Small waves lapped at the shore with a hungry rhythm, as if the sea itself was breathing, waiting. Urashima pushed his boat into the shallows and climbed in, taking up his oar. The moment he began to row, the wind shifted. It came from behind him now, pushing him away from shore with a force that seemed deliberate, purposeful. He rowed past the familiar fishing spots, past the reef where he usually cast his nets. Something deeper called to him today. The storm was building, thunder rumbling in the distance like the footsteps of giants. Lightning flickered inside the clouds, illuminating them from within. The rational part of his mind whispered that he should turn back, but his hands continued rowing, pulling him farther from shore, deeper into waters he had never explored. The waves grew larger, lifting his small boat and dropping it into troughs that seemed to reach down into nothing. Water sprayed across the bow, soaking him, but he did not stop. He could not. The compulsion was too strong, as if he had become a puppet and invisible strings controlled his every movement. His heart pounded, not entirely from fear, but from something else. Anticipation, perhaps, or recognition. When he finally stopped rowing, his arms burning with exhaustion, he found himself in a part of the ocean he did not recognize. The shore was a distant smudge, barely visible through the mist. Here, the water was strangely calm despite the approaching storm, flat as polished stone. The silence was profound, broken only by his own ragged breathing. It felt wrong, this stillness. The sea was never truly quiet, but now it waited. Urashima looked down into the water. It was clearer here than near shore, and impossibly deep. He could see down, down, down into shadows that seemed to pulse with their own light. Shapes moved in those depths, large shapes that glided with purpose. His hands trembled as he gripped the side of his boat. That was when he heard it. A sound that was not quite a voice, but not quite music either. It rose from the depths, a melody without words, haunting and beautiful and utterly alien. It wrapped around him like silk, like chains, like promises he did not understand, but desperately wanted to keep. Urashima leaned forward, drawn by the sound, his reflection in the dark water staring back at him, with eyes that seemed to belong to someone else. And then he saw the turtle. Before we follow the turtle into the depths where light dies and ancient things wait, let us understand the man who would accept such a doomed invitation. Urashima Taro's loneliness was not born from the loss of his family alone, though that grief carved deep grooves into his soul. His solitude grew from a more fundamental disconnection. He had always felt slightly out of step with the world, as if he existed in a different rhythm than everyone around him. As a child, he would sit by the shore for hours, watching the tide's eternal dance while other children played their games and built their friendships. His mother would find him there at dusk, his small form silhouetted against the orange sky. So still, he seemed carved from the same stone as the cliffs. "You have the sea in your blood," she would say, both affection and worry in her voice. His father understood better. He would sit beside his son in companionable silence, teaching him to read the water's moods, to understand the language of waves and currents. Those lessons were all Urashima had left of his father now. He practiced them daily, studying how the surface rippled over hidden rocks, how certain fish appeared only when the moon was dark, how the wind's direction foretold the next day's catch. He became the village's most skilled fisherman, but this expertise only widened the gap between him and others. They saw his knowledge as uncanny, his catches as suspiciously consistent. Whispers followed him. Whispers that perhaps he had made bargains with the sea spirits, that perhaps he was not entirely human himself. He had tried once to build connections. There had been a girl, Sakura, the daughter of a merchant who visited the village each spring. She had smiled at him, genuinely smiled, without fear or suspicion. They had walked together along the shore, her laughter like wind chimes in the salt air. He had dared to imagine a different life, one with warmth and companionship. But her father saw only a poor fisherman with strange ways, and when spring ended, she did not return. Later, Urashima heard she had married a sake brewer in a prosperous town. He did not blame her. He had nothing to offer but the sea, and the sea was a jealous companion. After that, he stopped trying. He embraced his solitude, wore it like armor. His cottage became a hermitage. He spoke to the waves more than to people, finding their constancy more reliable than human affection. The villagers eventually gave up their attempts to include him in festivals or arrange marriages for him. He faded from their concerns, becoming more legend than neighbor, the strange fisherman who lived at the edge of things, neither fully part of the village nor fully separate from it. But loneliness, no matter how familiar, carves hollow spaces in the heart, and hollow spaces echo with dangerous yearnings. Urashima yearned for meaning. He yearned to matter, to be part of something larger than his small existence. When he looked at the horizon each dawn, he felt it calling. Adventure, purpose, transformation. Anything to break the endless cycle of rising, fishing, mending, sleeping. The monotony pressed on him like the weight of all that water, and sometimes, in his darkest moments, he wondered if simply walking into the waves and letting them claim him might be a kind of mercy. He had started having dreams, strange dreams where he walked beneath the sea as easily as on land, where creatures with human eyes and inhuman bodies watched him pass, where a voice, feminine and sad and infinitely patient, called his name over and over. He would wake from these dreams with salt water on his lips, though his windows were closed and the sea was distant. He would wake with sand in his bed, though he had not visited the beach the night before. He would wake with the certainty that something was waiting for him, something that had been waiting a very long time. The village priest, when Urashima mentioned these dreams in passing, had recoiled. "You are being called," the old man had said, his voice shaking. "The sea spirits mark certain souls. You must resist. You must make offerings at the shrine. Pray for protection." But Urashima had not made offerings. He had not prayed for protection. Deep down, in a place he barely acknowledged, he wanted to be called. He wanted to be chosen. Even if it meant his destruction, at least it would mean he mattered to something in this indifferent universe. So when he found himself alone in his boat on that storm-threatening morning, in waters he did not know, hearing music from impossible depths, watching shapes move in the darkness below, he was not as surprised as he should have been. Part of him, the part that had been hollow and yearning for so long, recognized this moment. This was what he had been waiting for. This was why he had stayed by the sea when every rational person would have left. This was his answer. The turtle rose from the depths slowly, almost gently. It was enormous, larger than his boat, its shell encrusted with barnacles and coral that gave it the appearance of a mobile reef. But it was old, impossibly old. Urashima could see it in the creature's eyes, black and deep and knowing. Those eyes held centuries, maybe millennia. They held wisdom and sorrow and something else that made Urashima's breath catch in his throat. Recognition. The turtle knew him. Somehow, it knew him. The creature surfaced without a splash, as if the water welcomed its emergence, parting reverently around its ancient form. Up close, Urashima could see the intricate patterns worn into its shell, not natural growth rings, but symbols, carved or burned or somehow written into the very substance of its being. These markings formed characters in a language older than any he had learned from his father's scrolls. They glowed faintly, pulsing with a soft green luminescence that reminded him of foxfire in deep forests, of ghostly lights that lured travelers astray. The turtle's flippers moved with slow grace, keeping it level with the boat. It made no sound, but Urashima heard something nonetheless, a voice, or the impression of a voice, forming directly in his mind without passing through his ears. It was old and sad and terribly patient, like stone worn smooth by endless tides. You have been called Urashima Taro. You have been chosen. Chosen? Urashima's voice cracked, hoarse from disuse and shock. Chosen for what? The turtle's eyes blinked slowly, the membranes sliding across those black orbs with ancient deliberation. To witness, to remember, to bear the weight of knowledge that should have remained buried beneath the waves. Urashima's hands gripped the sides of his boat, his knuckles white. The rational part of his mind screamed at him to row away, to flee while he still could. But that hollow yearning, that desperate need for something beyond his small life, kept him frozen in place. I don't understand. You will. The turtle began to sink, its shell descending inch by inch beneath the dark surface. But first, you must save me. Save you? How? And then Urashima saw it. Tangled around the turtle's rear flipper was a net, but not just any net. It was old, rotted through in places, woven from fiber that looked like human hair mixed with seaweed. The net glowed with the same green light as the symbols on the turtle's shell, and where it touched the creature's flesh, the skin was marked with burns that wept a dark substance into the water. The turtle was in pain, had been in pain for a long time, perhaps years, perhaps longer. Without thinking, Urashima reached for his knife. A simple blade his father had made, its handle wrapped in cord worn smooth by his grip. He leaned over the side of the boat, his fingers reaching toward the net. The moment he touched it, a shock ran up his arm, not painful but intensely cold, as if he had plunged his hand into winter itself. The fibers were tough, resistant to his blade, but he sawed through them one by one, working carefully to avoid harming the turtle's damaged flesh. The creature remained perfectly still, facilitating his work. As each strand parted, the green glow faded slightly, and Urashima could feel something else leaving with it, some curse or spell woven into the net's very being. It took time, his arm aching from holding an awkward position, his knife dulling against the strange material. But finally, the last thread separated, and the net fell away, drifting down into the depths like a skeletal hand releasing its grip. The turtle shuddered, a ripple running through its massive body. The burns on its flipper began to heal, the damaged flesh knitting together with unnatural speed. When the wounds had closed completely, leaving only faint scars, the turtle's eyes fixed on Urashima with an intensity that made him want to look away, but unable to break contact. You have freed me from a binding that has lasted 300 years. A debt is owed. A debt that can only be repaid with truth and time. I don't want repayment, Urashima said, though he did not know why. I only did what anyone would do. No. The turtle's mental voice was firm. No one else would have. No one else could have. That net was invisible to ordinary eyes. Only one touched by the sea spirits could perceive it. Only one already marked for the depths could cut its threads. You were meant to free me, Urashima Taro, and I am meant to take you home. Home? But my home is... He gestured vaguely toward the distant shore, though he could no longer see it through the thickening mist. That was never your home. Your true home waits below, where the light fails and pressure crushes ordinary flesh, where my princess waits, counting the ages, hoping for the one who would free her messenger and accept her invitation. The storm finally broke. Rain began to fall, heavy drops that turned the sea's surface into a dancing chaos. Thunder rolled overhead, and lightning split the sky with white fire. But around the turtle and Urashima's boat, the water remained strangely calm, as if they existed in a pocket outside normal weather, outside normal time. "What if I refuse?" Urashima asked, though he already knew he would not, could not. "Then you will return to your shore, to your cottage, to your nets. You will grow old catching fish that taste increasingly of ash. You will die forgotten, and the sea will close over your memory as if you never were. But the hollow place inside you will never be filled. The yearning will never be answered. You will remain incomplete until your final breath." It was cruel to state it so plainly, but it was also true. Urashima felt it in his bones, in his blood, in that hollow space where meaning should have lived. He looked at his hands, calloused and scarred from a lifetime of thankless work. He looked at his small boat, barely worthy of the name. He looked toward where his village should be, invisible now behind veils of mist and rain. "And if I accept?" The turtle's eyes gleamed. "Then you will know wonder. You will know beauty. You will matter to someone, even if only for a while. But know this, Urashima Taro, the depths do not release what they claim. The sea remembers everything, but it also transforms all it touches. You will not return unchanged. You may not return at all. It was not a fair choice. It was not even really a choice." But Urashima had made his decision long before the turtle surfaced, perhaps before he even pushed his boat into the water this morning. Perhaps he had made it years ago, when he first heard the sea's call and answered it instead of running. "Take me," he said simply. The turtle nodded, a strangely human gesture from such an ancient creature. "Then hold your breath, fisherman. Hold it as long as you can. And when you can hold it no longer, breathe anyway. Trust the water. Trust the change. Trust that some drownings are beginnings rather than endings." Before Urashima could ask what that meant, the turtle dove. The water erupted around them, pulling Urashima from his boat with irresistible force. He barely had time to fill his lungs with air before he was under, descending rapidly into darkness that should have been absolute, but somehow wasn't. The green glow from the turtle's shell illuminated their path, revealing glimpses of things he had no names for. Creatures with too many eyes, forests of swaying kelp that seemed to reach for him with vegetable hunger, ruins of structures that suggested civilizations had risen and fallen in these depths long before humans walked the land above. His lungs began to burn. Pressure built in his chest, his ears, behind his eyes. They descended deeper and deeper still, past where any light could penetrate, into regions where the weight of all that water should have crushed him flat. His vision started to narrow, darkness creeping in from the edges. His body screamed for air, every cell demanding he breathe, even though breathing would mean his death. "Breathe," the turtle's voice urged. "Trust." Urashima could hold out no longer. His mouth opened against his will, water rushing in, and he breathed. He breathed water as easily as air. It flowed into his lungs without drowning him, carrying something else with it, something that tasted of salt and time and ancient magic. His body accepted it, adjusting to this new element as if it had always been meant for this. The pain faded. The pressure ceased to matter. He was changing, just as the turtle had warned, becoming something other than what he had been. And still they descended, down into the heart of mysteries that should have remained forever hidden, toward a princess who had been waiting, toward a palace built from coral and regret, toward a fate that had been written in water and could not be unwritten no matter how much he might come to wish it so. The descent continued for what felt like hours, though time had become as fluid as the water surrounding him. Urashima clung to the turtle's shell, his fingers finding purchase among the barnacles and carved symbols. Each breath of water felt more natural than the last, his body completing its transformation into something neither fully human nor entirely creature of the sea. His skin took on a faint luminescence, a pale glow that matched the turtle's green light. His hair floated around his face like black silk, moving with currents he could not feel, but somehow understood. The darkness was absolute now, broken only by their twin lights and occasional flashes from deep-dwelling things. Fish with lanterns growing from their heads, jellyfish that pulsed with bioluminescent hearts, organisms that defied categorization, floating past like living stars. Everything down here had adapted to the absence of sun, finding other ways to see, to hunt, to exist. Urashima wondered what he was adapting to, what he was becoming with each passing moment, each breath of enchanted water. The turtle spoke to him as they descended, its mental voice a constant companion against the profound silence. The princess is Otohime, daughter of Ryujin, the dragon god of the sea. She has ruled the undersea palace for 1,000 years, and every year has increased her loneliness. Her father charges her with maintaining the balance between depths and surface, between the world of water and the world of air. It is a sacred duty. It is also a prison. Why does she want to meet me? Urashima asked, his voice strange in his ears, half sound and half thought. Because you freed me. Because you can see what others cannot. Because you are marked by the sea's attention in ways that make you special. Or perhaps, and here the turtle's voice took on a darker tone, because she needs something from you. Something only a human who has become partially sea-touched can provide. What could I possibly offer a princess? The turtle did not answer immediately. They passed through a field of vents in the ocean floor, superheated water erupting from cracks in the earth in plumes that glowed red and orange. Strange worms clustered around these thermal springs, pale and eyeless, thriving in conditions that would have destroyed surface life. The turtle navigated through them with practiced ease. Freedom, it finally said, or the illusion of it. Sometimes that is enough. The ocean floor began to change. What had been bare rock and sediment gave way to structures, walls of coral shaped too deliberately to be natural, pillars carved from volcanic stone and encrusted with shells arranged in patterns that suggested writing or art, or perhaps both. They were entering the palace's outer precincts, and even in the darkness, Urashima could sense its vastness. This was no small dwelling, but a city unto itself, spreading across the seafloor for distances he could not fathom. Gardens appeared, if they could be called such. Instead of flowers, there were anemones that swayed in elegant choreography, their tentacles creating hypnotic patterns. Instead of trees, there were massive kelp forests cultivated and shaped by unseen gardeners, their fronds forming arches and bowers. Schools of fish moved through these gardens like flocks of birds, their scales flashing silver and gold and iridescent blue in the combined light of Urashima's glow and the turtle's shell. Other creatures began to appear, denizens of this underwater realm. Some were recognizable, octopi with intelligence gleaming in their eyes, rays gliding past with wings spanning wider than his boat had been, sharks that circled at a distance with curiosity rather than hunger. Others were harder to classify, beings that were part fish and part something else, with faces too knowing to be merely animal. They watched Urashima pass, their expressions ranging from wonder to suspicion to what might have been pity. "They know why you are here," the turtle said. Word spreads quickly in the depths. "A human comes to the princess's court, a human who breathes our water. They wonder if you are a gift or a curse. Perhaps you are both." The buildings grew more elaborate as they approached the palace's heart. Towers spiraled upward, their surfaces covered in mother-of-pearl that created rainbows even without sunlight. Bridges arched between structures, their railings formed from living coral that pulsed gently. Lanterns hung at intervals, not fire but glowing creatures trapped in globes of glass or crystal, their light steady and cold. Music drifted through the water, not the melody he had heard before, but something closer to the song's whales sing, deep and resonant and achingly beautiful. And then they arrived. The palace itself rose before them like a dream made tangible. It was enormous, dwarfing anything humans had ever built, its walls translucent in places, revealing chambers and corridors that seemed to go on forever. The main structure resembled a shell, a nautilus chamber expanded to impossible size, its spiral shape both organic and architectural. Gates of jade stood open, flanked by statues of dragons whose eyes glowed with an inner fire. The turtle swam through these gates without pausing, and Urashima followed, because he could not do otherwise. The compulsion that had drawn him from shore, that had kept him rowing into dangerous waters, that had made him accept this impossible journey, it pulled at him still, stronger than ever. He was meant to be here. For good or ill, this was his destiny. The entry hall was vast, its ceiling lost in darkness high above. Pillars lined the space, each carved with scenes from the sea's history, ships sinking, kingdoms rising and falling beneath the waves, gods and monsters locked in eternal battle. The floor was smooth black stone, polished to a mirror finish that reflected everything perfectly. But when Urashima looked down at his reflection, he barely recognized himself. His eyes had changed, the whites now faintly luminescent, the irises taking on a silver blue quality, like storm clouds over water. His skin was paler, almost translucent, with veins visible beneath the surface carrying blood that seemed to glow. He was beautiful in a terrible, inhuman way. "What have I become?" he whispered. "What you needed to be," the turtle answered. "What she needed you to be." Courtiers began to appear, emerging from side passages and descending staircases that seemed carved from ice. They were the sea people in their full diversity. Kappa with shells and webbed hands, Mizuchi serpent folk with human torsos and snake tails, Ningyo with fish tails and humanoid faces marked by an ethereal sadness. They bowed as the turtle passed, but their eyes remained fixed on Urashima, assessing, judging, wondering. The throne room lay at the palace's heart, accessed through doors of pearl that swung open silently at their approach. The chamber beyond took Urashima's breath away, though breathing no longer held the same meaning it once had. The space was circular, impossibly vast, its domed ceiling painted with constellations he did not recognize. Star maps from ages before human memory, perhaps, or prophecies of skies yet to come. The walls were living coral in every color imaginable, growing in intricate patterns that seemed to shift when he looked directly at them, forming images, and then dissolving into abstraction. But it was the throne itself that commanded attention. carved from a single massive pearl, it gleamed with an inner radiance that cast everything around it in soft, dreamlike light. The pearl's surface was not smooth, but etched with the same ancient script that marked the turtle's shell, words that spoke of binding and duty and sacrifice. Upon this throne sat Princess Otohime, and Urashima's heart, changed though it was, still knew how to falter. She was beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful. A tsunami seen from a distance, lightning frozen in the moment before it strikes. Her hair floated around her like ink in water, black and impossibly long, strands drifting past her throne to pool on the floor. Her skin was pale as moonlight on snow, unmarked and ageless. Her eyes were the color of the deepest ocean trenches, that particular blue-black that exists beyond where light can reach. She wore robes of silk that seemed woven from captured waves, shifting between green and blue and silver with each subtle movement. But there was something else, something that made Urashima's newfound instincts whisper warnings. Around her throne, barely visible, were threads, thousands of nearly transparent threads that connected her to the palace walls, to the floor, to the very water itself. They pulsed gently, as if carrying her heartbeat to every corner of her domain. Or perhaps, Urashima thought with growing unease, carrying the palace's heartbeat to her. It was impossible to tell which was the prisoner and which was the cage. The princess's lips curved into a smile that held both welcome and warning. When she spoke, her voice was music and tide and the whisper of things buried in sand for centuries. Urashima Taro, the fisherman who sees what others cannot, the lonely soul who answered when called. You have freed my faithful messenger from a binding that should have killed him long ago. For this, you have my gratitude. Urashima bowed, his body moving with a grace that was new to him, as if the water taught him proper protocols as he needed them. Princess Otohime, I did only what any person would do when confronted with suffering. No. Her smile widened, showing teeth that were just slightly too perfect, too white. You did what you were meant to do. There is a difference. Sit with me, fisherman. Rest from your journey. Let me repay your kindness with hospitality, as is proper between your world and mine. The turtle, his task complete, bowed deeply and withdrew, swimming backward until the pearl doors closed between them. Urashima suddenly felt very alone despite the courtiers lining the walls, despite the princess's attention fixed upon him like a physical weight. The hollow place inside him, the yearning that had driven him to accept this impossible journey, did not feel filled so much as replaced with something else, a different kind of emptiness, one shaped like anticipation or dread. Days passed, or perhaps weeks, or perhaps no time passed at all, for in the undersea palace, time moved according to rules Urashima could not comprehend. There were no sunrises to mark mornings, no sunset to herald night. Instead, there was only the constant glow of bioluminescence and magic, the eternal twilight of a realm that existed outside normal temporal flow. Princess Otohime kept him constantly entertained, showing him wonders that no surface dweller had ever witnessed. She took him to gardens where flowers grew that were not plants, but colonies of tiny creatures working in concert, creating blossoms more intricate than anything on land. She showed him libraries carved into living rock, their shelves holding scrolls written on materials that would dissolve if exposed to air, the accumulated knowledge of civilizations that had thrived when the world above was still young. They attended performances in theaters where the performers were schools of fish moving in perfect synchronization, creating living paintings in 3 dimensions. They dined on foods Urashima could not name, served on dishes of mother of pearl by servants who moved with the fluid grace of water, made animate. The princess was attentive, charming, interested in his stories of the surface world, even though they must have seemed desperately mundane compared to the marvels she showed him. And yet, beneath the splendor, beneath the hospitality and wonder, Urashima felt threads of wrongness winding through everything. He noticed how the courtiers' smiles never quite reached their eyes, how they glanced at him with that same mixture of pity and concern he had seen when he first arrived. He noticed how the princess never left her throne for long, how those nearly invisible threads kept her tethered to it, no matter where else in the palace she seemed to be. He noticed how questions about the surface world, about sunlight, about seasons, about change, made her expression tighten with something that looked like hunger or loss. One evening, though it was always evening here, as they sat in a pavilion overlooking one of the palace's many gardens, Urashima found the courage to ask what had been troubling him. "Princess, why am I truly here? Surely my small kindness to your messenger does not warrant such lavish hospitality." Otohime was silent for a long moment, her fingers trailing through the water as if reading something in its currents. When she spoke, her voice was softer than before, stripped of its formal court cadence. "You are here because I am lonely, Urashima Taro. Lonelier than you can imagine. I have ruled this realm for 1,000 years, watching ages pass like waves. I have seen empires rise on the seafloor and crumble into sand. I have counted every fish in my domain, memorized every face of every courtier who has served me. And I am tired. Tired of eternity. Tired of duty. Tired of being alone in a palace full of subjects, but empty of equals. You have no family? No companions?" "My father is the dragon god Ryujin. He sleeps in the deepest trench, where even light that travels from the stars cannot penetrate. He wakes once every century to ensure I am maintaining my duties, controlling the tides, keeping the sea's balance, preventing the deep powers from rising to destroy the surface world. He is powerful beyond measure and cares for me in his way, but his way is vast and impersonal as the ocean itself. He does not understand loneliness. Dragons do not need companionship. But I am not entirely dragon. My mother was human once, before she was transformed. I inherited her capacity for connection, for longing, for the desperate need to matter to someone. This confession hung between them like a pearl of great price, precious and fragile. Urashima understood that need all too well, had lived with its echo in his own chest for years. "So you brought me here for company?" "And more." Otohime turned to face him fully, and in her eyes he saw depths that had nothing to do with the ocean. "I brought you here to offer you a choice. Stay with me. Be my companion, my equal, the one who understands what it means to be set apart. I can give you wonders beyond counting. You will never grow old here. You will never know hunger or cold or pain. You will have everything the surface world denied you. Purpose, belonging, someone who sees you for what you truly are." It was everything he had yearned for, everything the hollow place inside him had craved. And yet, something made him hesitate. "And if I refuse? If I wish to return to the surface?" The princess's expression did not change, but something in the water around them grew colder. "Then you are free to leave. I am not a captor, Urashima Taro. I do not keep what does not wish to stay. But know this, time moves differently here than above. What feels like days to you may have been years up there. What feels like weeks might have been decades. If you return, you may find everything you knew has turned to dust. Is that a risk you wish to take? How long have I been here? Does it matter? Will the answer change your decision? Urashima realized it would not. He had already made his choice, really. The moment he had breathed that first lungful of enchanted water and felt himself transform, the surface world had never truly been his home. It had been a place he existed, nothing more. Here, at least, he was seen. Here, he mattered to someone. I will stay, he said, for a while at least. Otohime's smile was radiant, genuine in a way her earlier smiles had not been. But Urashima, watching carefully, saw relief beneath the joy. Desperate relief, as if she had been holding her breath for his answer and could finally exhale. As if, perhaps, she needed him more than she had admitted. As if his staying solved some problem he did not yet understand. That night, she gave him a chamber in the palace's highest tower, a room with walls of translucent shell that let him see the ocean beyond in all its dark mystery. She gave him robes of silk that felt like water given form. She gave him servants who attended his every need with smiling faces that never wavered. She gave him everything except the one thing he increasingly needed, answers to questions he was only beginning to formulate. Seasons passed in the world above, though Urashima did not know it. His life in the undersea palace developed a rhythm, pleasant and unvarying. Each day, if days they could be called, brought new entertainments, new wonders, new conversations with the princess, who seemed genuinely grateful for his presence. They spoke of philosophy and poetry, of the nature of loneliness and the different shapes it could take. She taught him to read the ancient script that marked her throne and the turtle's shell, revealing it to be a language that described not just words, but concepts, binding and duty and sacrifice and love and despair, all woven together in characters that could not be translated so much as felt. He learned the palace's geography, swimming through its countless chambers and corridors. There were rooms devoted to memories, where images played out in captured water, showing scenes from the sea's long history. There were armories filled with weapons that could wound gods, forged in volcanic heat and quenched in dragon's blood. There were nurseries where young sea creatures were tended until they could survive on their own. There were meditation chambers where the water itself seemed to hold stillness like a physical thing. But there were also rooms that remained locked, doors of coral sealed shut with bindings similar to those that had held the turtle captive. When Urashima asked about them, the courtiers would change the subject smoothly, steering conversation to safer waters. The princess, when pressed, would smile and say they were storage chambers, nothing more, filled with relics best left undisturbed. Urashima began to notice other things as well. The palace, for all its splendor, was strangely static. The same fish swam the same patterns through the same gardens. The same plays were performed in the same theaters. The same meals were served in the same sequence. At first, he thought this was simply routine, the natural result of a well-ordered household. But as time passed, how much time, he could not say, he realized it was something else. The palace was caught in a loop, repeating the same moments over and over with variations so subtle they were almost invisible. And the threads. He saw them everywhere now, once he knew to look. They connected the princess to everything in her domain, but they also connected everything back to her. The palace was not just her home. It was an extension of her being, or she was an extension of it. They were locked together in a relationship he could not fully understand, each sustaining the other, each trapping the other. One evening, he encountered the turtle in one of the empty corridors. The ancient creature regarded him with those knowing eyes, and Urashima felt compelled to speak honestly. "Tell me the truth. Why did the princess really bring me here?" The turtle considered for a long moment before responding, its mental voice heavy with centuries of understanding. "She told you no lies. She is lonely. She does value your company, but there is more, yes, always more, with those bound to duty. The princess is tied to this place by oaths older than your civilization. She maintains the balance between depths and surface, keeps the ancient powers sleeping, prevents catastrophe through her constant vigilance. But such duty extracts a price. She fades, Urashima Taro. Year by year, century by century, she becomes less herself and more simply a function, tidekeeper, balance holder, eternal guardian. And I can help her somehow. How? Your presence reminds her that she is more than her duty. You are change in a changeless place, novelty in a realm of repetition. When she looks at you, she remembers what it was like to be something other than this palace's beating heart. But there is danger in that remembering. If she becomes too attached to you, too invested in maintaining the illusion that she can be something other than what she is, then what? The turtle's eyes were infinitely sad. Then she will try to keep you forever. And to keep something forever, one must ensure it never changes, never ages, never has the option to leave. Understand this, fisherman. Time passes differently here, not because of magic alone, but because the palace exists partially outside time's flow. It is a pocket, a bubble, a moment stretched across centuries. If you stay too long, you will become part of that eternal moment. You will become as static as the courtiers, as unchanging as the gardens, as trapped as she is. Can she not leave? If she is so powerful. Her father bound her here with oaths written in his own blood and hers. She is the lock that keeps the deep terrors sealed. If she leaves, if she fails in her duty, things will wake that should remain sleeping. The surface world will be scoured clean, and the depths will boil with ancient rage. She knows this. She accepts this. But acceptance does not make it easier. Can you understand that? To know your prison is necessary does not make it less a prison. Urashima did understand. He had been in his own prison on the surface, not bound by oaths, but by circumstance, by loss, by the simple fact of having nowhere else to go. What should I do? That is your choice to make, but make it soon, while you still can. The longer you stay, the harder leaving becomes. Already, your connection to the surface weakens. Your memories of sunlight grow dim. Soon, you will not even remember why you might want to return. And perhaps, for you, that would not be such a terrible fate. What do you have waiting above? An empty cottage, a village that never understood you, a life measured in monotony. The turtle swam away, leaving Urashima alone with thoughts that had grown increasingly troubling. He realized that he had not thought about the surface in a long time. How long? When he tried to remember his cottage, the image came slowly, faded like a painting left too long in the sun. His parents' faces were blurry. The sound of wind through bamboo, once so familiar, was now alien. He was forgetting, just as the turtle warned. That night, he dreamed for the first time since arriving. Or perhaps it was a memory surfacing from the depths of his transforming mind. He stood on the shore of his village, feeling real sunlight on real skin, breathing real air. The warmth was almost painful after so long in the cold depths. He saw his father standing in the shallows, mending nets, the way he used to when Urashima was young. His father looked up and smiled, but it was a sad smile. You went too deep, my son. Deeper than nets can reach. Can you still find your way back? Do I want to? Urashima heard himself ask. That, his father said, is the question, isn't it? Urashima woke, if he had truly been asleep, to find the princess sitting at the edge of his resting place. Her face was troubled, her hands clasped together tightly. You are thinking of leaving, she said. It was not a question. I don't know, he answered honestly. If you go, time will catch up to you all at once. However long you have been here, and it has been longer than you think, Urashima Taro, that many years will fall upon you the moment you breathe surface air. You may survive it. You may not. Is uncertainty better than certainty? Is freedom worth death? Is life in a cage truly life? She flinched as if struck. Is that what you think this is? A cage? Isn't it? For both of us? Otohime was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. Yes, it is a cage made of beauty and duty and loneliness. But it is my cage, Urashima. Mine by birth and oath and responsibility. You, though, you stumbled into it by accident, or perhaps by fate. You do not deserve to share my prison. Then let me help you escape it. There is no escape, only endurance. There must be a way. There is not. The force of her words stirred the water, creating currents that pushed him back. Do you think I have not tried? Do you think in 1,000 years I have not searched for a loophole, a way out, some clever solution? I am bound, Urashima. Utterly and completely. The only freedom I will ever know is death, and I cannot die while the duty remains. And the duty will always remain. She stood, her movements sharp with frustration and grief. I will give you a choice. A real choice, with full knowledge. Stay here with me and eventually become part of the palace's eternal moment, unchanging and immortal and trapped. Or leave, face whatever fate awaits you on the surface, and be free. But choose quickly. The tide of decision is running out. She left him then, disappearing through walls that parted at her approach and closed behind her, leaving him alone in a chamber that suddenly felt less like luxury and more like a gilded prison cell. Urashima stared at his hands, still luminescent, still not quite human, changed in ways he was only beginning to understand. 3 days later, or what felt like 3 days, Princess Otohime summoned Urashima to her throne room. The chamber was different now, emptied of courtiers, stripped of its usual ceremony. It was just the two of them, princess and fisherman, both trapped in circumstances not of their choosing. She held something in her hands, a box, small and ornate, made of what appeared to be jade inlaid with coral. It was tied shut with a red cord that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The box itself radiated a strange energy, not quite magical, but not entirely natural either. If you choose to leave, Otohime said, her voice carefully controlled, take this with you. It is a tamatabako, a treasure box. Inside it is something precious, a gift and a protection. But you must promise me one thing, Urashima Taro. You must never, under any circumstances, open this box. No matter what happens, no matter what you face, keep it sealed, and it will keep you safe in the time you have left. What is inside it? A kindness or a cruelty? Perhaps both, but only if opened. Sealed, it is simply a box, nothing more. Promise me you will not open it. Urashima took the box, feeling its weight in his hands. It was heavier than it looked, as if it contained not just objects but consequences, possibilities, futures. I promise. Liar, she said softly, but without malice. You will open it eventually. Humans always do. Curiosity is your greatest gift and your deepest curse, but perhaps by the time you open it, the opening will seem like mercy rather than tragedy. That is my hope, at least. Otohime. No. She held up a hand. Do not make this harder. I knew when I brought you here that you would leave. Part of me hoped otherwise, but the wiser part knew. You are not meant for eternity, Urashima Taro. You burn too brightly. You would exhaust yourself trying to illuminate my darkness, and then we would both be diminished. Better you return to your world while you still remember what it was to live in time, rather than outside it. What will happen to you? What has always happened? I will endure. I will maintain my duty. I will count the years until they blur into one endless present. Perhaps, when the oceans finally dry up and the sun expands to consume the earth, I will finally be free. Or perhaps I will continue even beyond that, maintaining balance in whatever comes after. It does not matter. This is my purpose. The resignation in her voice broke something in Urashima's chest. There must be another way. If you find one, send word. The turtle will hear if you speak to the waves. But do not waste your remaining life searching for solutions to unsolvable problems. That is my burden to bear, not yours. She stood from her throne, the threads connecting her to it, stretching and glowing more brightly. For the first time, Urashima saw pain flash across her face as she moved. The threads were not just connection. They were shackles that pulled tighter with every step she took away from her seat. She could leave the throne room, but not without agony, not without cost. Still, she came to him, those terrible threads stretching behind her like a bridal train made of suffering. She placed her hands on either side of his face, her touch cold and gentle. Thank you, Urashima Taro. Thank you for reminding me, even briefly, that I am more than my duty, that I am Otohime, daughter of dragons and humans both, princess and prisoner in person. Go now, before I weaken and beg you to stay, before I become selfish enough to trap you as I am trapped. She kissed his forehead, and the touch burned with cold that went deeper than flesh, marking his spirit with something that would never fade. A blessing or a curse, or simply a memory. He could not tell which. The turtle waits at the palace gates. He will take you to the surface. Go. Live. Remember me kindly. Urashima wanted to argue, to refuse, to somehow save this lonely immortal from her gilded cage. But he saw in her eyes that there was no saving her. There was only the choice to honor her sacrifice, or mock it by joining her in permanent imprisonment. With the box clutched tightly to his chest, he bowed deeply and turned away. Walking through the palace this final time felt different. Now he saw it for what it truly was, not a wonder, but a monument, not a home, but a mausoleum for the living. The beauty remained, but it was the beauty of ice sculptures, frozen and unchanging. The courtiers watched him pass with relief on their faces, as if his leaving somehow lightened their own burdens. Perhaps it did. Perhaps the princess's hope, however brief, had been a weight on all of them. The turtle waited, as promised, at the jade gates. It said nothing as Urashima climbed onto its shell, still clutching the box. They rose through the water, ascending from the timeless depths toward a surface Urashima had almost forgotten existed. As they rose, he looked back once. The palace glowed in the darkness like a star fallen to the ocean floor, beautiful and terrible and heartbreakingly lonely. Somewhere in its depths, Otohime sat on her throne, the threads binding her tight, counting the moments of an eternity she could not escape. He hoped she would forgive him for leaving. He hoped she would not. The ascent took far less time than the descent had, as if the ocean itself was eager to expel him, to return him to the world he belonged in. Pressure changed, temperature shifted, and light, real sunlight, warm and golden and utterly foreign after so long in the blue-green glow of the depths, began to filter down from above. Urashima's lungs burned as his body reversed its transformation. The water that had sustained him in the depths turned to poison, and he breached the surface, gasping, choking, drowning in air that felt thick and wrong. The turtle kept him afloat as he coughed and retched, his body violently readjusting to the atmosphere it had been made for. His skin lost its luminescence, returning to normal flesh, though paler than he remembered. His eyes cleared of their silver-blue tint. He became human again, or something close to it. When he could finally breathe without agony, when his vision stopped swimming, Urashima looked around. The ocean stretched in all directions, calm beneath a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The sun hung overhead, impossibly bright, impossibly warm. He had forgotten what warmth felt like. Tears streamed down his face from the light's intensity, or perhaps from something else entirely. "Where is my village?" he asked the turtle, his voice rough and strange. "Ahead. Not far. But Urashima Taro, remember what the princess told you. Time has passed differently. Be prepared for change." The turtle swam toward shore, and gradually the coastline came into view. But it was wrong. Everything was wrong. The mountains were the same shape, yes, but larger somehow, or perhaps he was simply seeing them through different eyes. The beach was wider than he remembered, the rocks arranged in patterns he did not recognize, and the village, where his village should have been, where he had spent his entire life, there stood something else. Buildings of wood and paper, yes, but more of them, larger ones, arranged in ways that were subtly different from his memory. The fishing boats pulled up on shore were of a design he had never seen, with sails marked with characters and styles that seemed both familiar and foreign. Smoke rose from chimneys in unfamiliar patterns. The turtle reached shallow water and stopped. "This is as far as I can take you. Whatever you face from this moment, you face alone. Remember the princess's gift. Remember your promise." How long was I gone? Time has no meaning in the depths. But here, where the sun marks the days and the moon counts the months, you have been absent for 300 years. The words did not make sense, could not make sense. 300 years. Everyone he had known was dead. His cottage was dust. His parents, his childhood, the girl who had smiled at him and then left. All of it was less than memory now. It was prehistory. "The box," Urashima said, his hands trembling as he held it up. "What is really inside?" "Your time, fisherman. All the years you did not age in the palace, preserved in that box like fish in salt. Open it, and they will return to you all at once. That is the princess's gift, to give you a choice. Remain as you are, young but displaced, a man out of time who will never fit in this new world. Or open the box, embrace your true age, and end this suffering quickly. That's not a gift, that's a cruelty. Perhaps, or perhaps it is the kindest thing she could offer, to let you choose your own ending rather than have it forced upon you. Now go, Urashima Taro. Your story is not yet complete." The turtle dove beneath the surface and was gone, leaving Urashima standing in the shallows, the box clutched to his chest, staring at a world that had moved on without him. He waded to shore, his legs unsteady after so long swimming. The sensation of sand and stone beneath his feet was alien now, the pull of gravity uncomfortable after the weightlessness of water. He collapsed on the beach, his body shaking, his mind struggling to process what had happened. 300 years. The words echoed in his head like a funeral bell. 300 years of history he knew nothing about. 300 years of changes, wars, peace, births, deaths. The world had turned and turned and turned while he had been suspended in the palace's eternal present. He looked at the box in his hands. The red cord pulsed gently, and he could swear he heard something inside, a ticking like a clock, or a heartbeat, or the whisper of centuries waiting to be released. It would be so easy to open it, to untie that cord, lift the lid, and let whatever was inside take him, to end this confusion and displacement and terrible, crushing loneliness. But he had promised Otohime he would not open it. A deathbed promise to a princess who could not die, given in a palace that existed outside time. Did such promises still hold meaning here, in the real world, where time flowed forward and nothing stayed the same? Urashima struggled to his feet and walked toward the village. People stared at him as he approached, a naked stranger rising from the sea, clutching a box, his expression wild. They muttered to each other in a dialect he could almost but not quite understand, the language having shifted in his absence. Children pointed. Adults grabbed their offspring and pulled them away. An old man approached cautiously, his face lined with age and curiosity. He spoke, and Urashima strained to understand the words that were like his language, but changed, evolved. "Stranger, where do you come from? Are you shipwrecked?" I lived here. Or I did. 300 years ago." The old man's eyes widened. He looked at the box in Urashima's hands, and something like recognition crossed his face. The tale. The legend of Urashima Taro, the fisherman who saved a turtle and visited the dragon palace. We tell that story to children. But it is only a story. You cannot be. I am. I was. I don't know what I am anymore. The old man backed away, fear replacing curiosity. The spirits have sent you back. Why? What doom do you bring? No doom. I bring nothing but myself and this box and memories of a world that no longer exists. Others gathered now, drawn by the commotion. They whispered, argued, debated whether he was truly the Urashima from legend, or simply a madman who had heard the tale and claimed it as his own. Some wanted to drive him away. Others wanted to take him to the village elders. Still others simply stared, trying to reconcile the young man before them with a story 3 centuries old. Urashima pushed through them, walking on legs that remembered the village's layout, even though everything had changed. He went to where his cottage should have been and found a shrine instead. A small structure, with his name carved on a stone marker. Someone had remembered him. Someone had honored him. The realization brought fresh tears. An old woman knelt at the shrine, placing flowers and rice. She looked up as he approached, and her expression shifted from devotion to shock. You are, but you cannot be. Tell me, Urashima said, his voice breaking. Tell me what happened after I disappeared. Tell me how I am remembered. The woman stood shakily. The legend says you saved a turtle, who was really a messenger of Princess Otohime. You were taken to the dragon palace as reward. Years passed in what seemed like days. When you returned, everything had changed. You were given a box, told never to open it, but grief and confusion overwhelmed you, and you opened it anyway. Smoke rose from the box, and you aged 300 years in an instant, crumbling to dust on this very beach. That hasn't happened yet. Then you still have time to make a different choice. What choice? Everyone I knew is dead. Everything I understood is gone. I am a ghost haunting a world that has no place for me. The old woman reached out and touched the box gently. The choice to live, even in a world you do not recognize, even in pain and displacement, even in loneliness, life remains precious. Do not open this box, young man. Do not let the legend end as it always has. Perhaps you are meant to change the story. But Urashima did not know how to change a story that had been written 3 centuries ago, that had become folklore and myth. He did not know how to fit into a world that had moved on without him. He did not know how to carry the weight of all those lost years. He walked away from the shrine, away from the village, back toward the beach. The box grew heavier with each step, or perhaps it was his heart that grew heavy, weighed down by impossible choices and consequences he could never have foreseen when he first answered the sea's call. Urashima sat on the beach as the sun set, painting the sky in colors that were both familiar and strange. 300 years had passed, but sunsets remained the same. The waves still broke against the shore in eternal rhythm. Some things, at least, were constant. He turned the box over in his hands, examining it from every angle. The jade was flawless, the coral inlay depicting scenes he now recognized. The palace, the turtle, the princess on her throne. It was beautiful in its craftsmanship, terrible in its implications. Inside this small container lay his mortality, his true age, 300 years of accumulated time waiting to crash down upon him like a tsunami. The princess had said it was a kindness, a gift, a way to end his suffering if the displacement became too much to bear. But she had also known he would open it eventually. Humans always do, she had said. Curiosity is your greatest gift and your deepest curse. Was he curious, or was he simply tired? The shock of returning to find everything changed had drained him of whatever strength he had left. The thought of trying to build a new life here, among people who saw him as either a madman or a legend, felt impossible. What skills did he have? Fishing techniques 300 years out of date. Knowledge of a language that had evolved past his understanding. Memories of people who were dust. He thought of Otohime, trapped in her palace, bound by oaths and duty and threads that pulled tighter with every moment. She would remain there for eternity, maintaining the balance, keeping the ancient terrors sealed. At least her prison had beauty and wonder. What did his world offer? Only the slow grind of mortality, the knowledge that he was utterly alone, the certainty that he would never belong anywhere ever again. Perhaps opening the box was not just ending his suffering. Perhaps it was justice. He had lived 300 years without aging, without truly experiencing time's passage. Shouldn't he pay that debt? Shouldn't the universe have its balance restored? His fingers moved to the red cord. It felt alive beneath his touch, pulsing with anticipation. All he had to do was pull. One simple motion, and everything would end. The confusion would end. The displacement would end. The terrible, crushing loneliness would end. Don't. Urashima turned. The turtle had surfaced nearby, its ancient eyes fixed on him. You told me this is as far as you could take me, that I had to face this alone. I said that was as far as I could take you physically. But the princess gave me one more task. If you seemed ready to open that box, I was to tell you the rest of the truth. The truth she could not bear to speak herself. What truth? The box does not contain your years, Urashima Taro. That was a lie. A necessary lie, but a lie nonetheless. What the box contains is much simpler and much more cruel. Then what? It contains nothing. The box is empty. It has always been empty. The aging that will occur if you open it is not because the box releases stored time. but because the act of opening breaks the last enchantment protecting you. The princess's kiss, the one she gave you before you left, placed a preservation spell upon you. As long as the box remains sealed, as long as you keep your promise to her, the spell holds. But if you break that promise, if you open the box, the spell shatters. And without its protection, all those 300 years will catch up to you in an instant. So it's a test? A way to force me to keep my promise through threat of death? No. It is something more complex. The princess knows human nature. She knows that eventually, despair or curiosity or simple exhaustion will drive you to open that box. She is counting on it. Do you understand? She wants you to join her. The words did not immediately make sense. Urashima stared at the turtle, trying to process what it was saying. Join her? But I would die. The 300 years. Your body would die, yes. But your soul, marked by her kiss, bound to the deep magic through your transformation in the palace, that would return to her. You would become one of her courtiers, one of the eternal attendants who serve her in that timeless realm. You would spend eternity by her side, unchanging and immortal and trapped just as she is trapped. She would no longer be alone. Neither would you. That is her true gift. A chance at eternal companionship, bought at the price of your mortal life. Urashima's hands trembled, the box nearly slipping from his grasp. That's monstrous. To manipulate me like that. To lie. Is it? She told you the truth that mattered. That opening the box would end your current suffering. She simply chose not to elaborate on what would come after. And can you truly blame her? She is lonely beyond human comprehension, Urashima. Lonelier than you are now, lonelier than you can imagine. For 1,000 years she has endured, and she will endure for thousands more. Is it so terrible that she might want one person who truly understood her, who chose to be with her, by her side for eternity? But I wouldn't be choosing. I'd be tricked into it. Would you? Think carefully. If she had explained everything, if she had said, open this box and your mortal life ends but your spirit returns to me, and we can be together forever in my palace, what would you have answered? Urashima opened his mouth to say no, to insist he would have refused, but the words would not come, because he was not certain, because part of him, the part that had found connection and understanding in those timeless depths, might have been tempted, might have said yes. What should I do? He whispered. That is your choice. But make it knowing all the consequences. Open the box and return to her as an eternal spirit bound to her service. Keep it sealed and remain in this world as a man out of time, aging naturally from this point forward, but never truly belonging. There is no good option, Urashima Taro. There is only the choice that you can live with or die with. The turtle began to sink beneath the waves. Wait, is there no other way? Can I not return to the palace physically? Can I not visit her without dying? No, the path you took was one way. The depths will not accept you again unless you are dead or transformed beyond recognition as human. Those are the rules. Those have always been the rules. I am sorry, fisherman. Some currents cannot be fought, only endured or surrendered to. And then the turtle was gone, leaving Urashima alone on the beach with the box and the choice and the weight of consequences he had never asked for, but could not escape. Night fell. Stars emerged, and Urashima stared at them with wonder. He had forgotten stars during his time in the depths. The palace had constellations painted on its ceiling, but they were not the same as these. Real stars, burning across incomprehensible distances indifferent to human suffering. He had to choose. That much was clear. Continuing to delay, continuing to carry this box without decision, would only prolong his agony. He had to choose between two forms of loss, two kinds of death, two impossibilities masquerading as options. If he kept the box sealed, he would remain in this world. He would age naturally from this point forward, but he would start that aging as a young man in a time he did not understand. He could learn the new ways, adapt to the changed language, build some kind of life among people who would always see him as strange. Perhaps, in time, the displacement would fade. Perhaps he would find new connections, new purposes. Perhaps the hollow place inside him could be filled with something other than yearning for the depths. But he would be alone. Fundamentally, irreducibly alone in a way that ordinary loneliness could not touch. Every person he would meet would be a stranger, not just personally, but temporally. They belonged to this time, and he did not. Their concerns, their history, their cultural touchstones, all of it would be alien to him. He would spend his entire life as an outsider, a legend made flesh, forever explaining himself, forever out of sync. If he opened the box, he would die. His body would age 300 years in an instant, crumbling to dust as the legend foretold. But his spirit, marked by the princess's kiss, would return to the depths. He would become one of the eternal courtiers, serving Otohime in her timeless palace. He would never be lonely again. She would be there, understanding him as no one in this surface world ever could. They would share their isolation, make it bearable through companionship. But he would be trapped, just as trapped as she was, bound by magic and oaths to a realm outside time. He would never see sunlight again, never feel wind or rain, never experience change or growth or the simple passage of seasons. He would exist in that eternal present, beautiful and stagnant, forever. It was not a fair choice. Neither option was. But perhaps, Urashima thought, fairness was not the point. The princess had offered him what she could, an escape from the suffering of displacement, bought at the price of mortal existence. She had manipulated him, yes, but she had also been honest about the fundamental truth. There was no path that led to happiness, only different shapes of endurance. He thought about his life before the palace, the loneliness, the monotony, the feeling of being adrift without purpose. He thought about his time in the depths, the wonder, yes, but also the growing sense of wrongness, the understanding that he was becoming less himself and more a function of Otohime's need. He thought about this moment, sitting on a beach in a world 300 years removed from everything he knew, holding a box that contained either his death or his rebirth depending on perspective. What did he want? Not what he should want, not what was wise or proper or rational. What did his heart, that hollow yearning thing, actually desire? Connection. He wanted connection. He wanted to matter to someone, to be seen and understood. He had found that in the palace, however briefly. Otohime had seen him, truly seen him, in ways no one on the surface ever had. She had understood his loneliness because it matched her own. They had been, for a moment, not alone. Could he build that here, in this new world? Perhaps, given time, given effort, given luck. But it would be hard, so terribly hard. And he was tired. So tired of fighting, of trying, of working to belong in places that did not want him. The box grew warm in his hands, as if sensing his thoughts, urging him toward decision. The red cord pulsed faster now, in rhythm with his heartbeat. All he had to do was pull. One motion, and everything would resolve itself. One way or another, the suffering would end. But there was something else to consider. If he returned to the palace as a spirit, if he became one of Otoheim's eternal courtiers, would that truly help her? Or would it simply add one more person to her cage, one more responsibility to her burden? She had said his presence reminded her that she was more than her duty. But if he was trapped there forever, unchanging as everything else in that realm, would he still provide that reminder? Or would he become just another static element in her eternal prison? Perhaps the greatest gift he could give her was to live, to stay here in this difficult world and carry the memory of her with him, to prove that their time together had meaning beyond the palace walls, to show that connection, however brief, however imperfect, could change a person in ways that endured. Or perhaps that was just rationalization, cowardice dressed up as nobility. Perhaps the honest truth was that he was afraid of dying, even if death led to a kind of immortality. Perhaps he was simply not ready to let go of the mortal world, for all its pain. Urashima stood, the box clutched to his chest, and walked along the shore. The waves whispered to him, but he could not understand their words anymore. That gift, if it had been a gift, was lost. He was fully human again, disconnected from the deep magic. He thought of his father's words from the dream. Can you still find your way back? But back to what? To whom? There was no back anymore. There was only forward into an uncertain future, or sideways into eternal stagnation. The old woman from the shrine appeared, walking slowly along the beach. She carried a lantern that cast dancing shadows. When she saw him, she smiled sadly. Still here, still deciding. How do you know what I'm deciding? I am old. I have lived long enough to recognize the look of someone standing at a crossroads. Will you open it? I don't know. What would you do? She laughed, a sound like wind through dry reeds. I would not have gone into the depths in the first place. But then, I am a coward. You, fishermen from legend, are braver than I. You accepted the unknown when it called. Few can say that. I'm not sure bravery is the right word. Foolishness, perhaps. There is little difference between the two sometimes. She sat on a rock, setting her lantern down. Let me tell you something. After you disappeared, your village mourned you. They built that shrine, yes, but more than that, they told your story. Generation after generation, the tale was passed down. The fisherman who was kind to a turtle, the man who saw wonder when others saw only water, the one who dared to visit the dragon princess. You became something larger than yourself. You mattered. I mattered as a story, not as a person. Is there a difference? We are all stories in the end. The question is whether we write our own or let others write them for us. You have the chance now to continue your story, to add new chapters, or you can let it end as legend says it should, with smoke and dust and a tragic ending. Urashima looked at the box, then at the old woman, then at the stars above. What if I'm too tired to write new chapters? What if I just want the story to end? Then open the box. I will not stop you. I will stay here and witness, and then I will tell others what happened. Your legend will be complete. But Urashima Taro, before you do, answer me this. In the palace, in those timeless moments with the princess, were you happy? He considered the question carefully. I was less lonely, but happy? No, I don't think I was happy. There was always a shadow over everything, the knowledge that it couldn't last, that something was wrong. And here, in this world, do you think you could find happiness? Real happiness, not just the absence of loneliness? I don't know. then perhaps that is your answer. Choose the unknown over the known. Choose the possibility of happiness over the certainty of beautiful suffering. But that is just an old woman's opinion. You must make your own choice. She stood, taking up her lantern. I will be at the shrine tomorrow morning. If you are alive, come find me. I will help you learn this new world. If you are dust, I will honor your memory and tell your story to my grandchildren. Either way, know that you have mattered, Urashima Taro. To me, to the princess who loved you enough to let you go, to everyone who has heard your tale, your life has meaning. Do not forget that. She walked away, her lantern bobbing in the darkness, leaving Urashima alone again with the box and the choice that would define his existence or end it. Dawn approached. The sky lightened gradually from black to deep blue to pale gray. Urashima had not moved from his spot on the beach, the box still in his hands. He had spent the entire night weighing his options, turning them over in his mind like shells found on the shore, examining each from every angle. He thought of Princess Otohime, alone in her palace, counting the moments of eternity. He thought of the old woman's words, that his life had meaning, that he had mattered. He thought of his father, his mother, everyone he had lost not to death, but to time's relentless march. And then, in the growing light of dawn, Urashima understood something that made his breath catch in his throat. The choice was not really about dying or living. It was not about returning to the palace or staying on the surface. The choice was about accepting loss. Loss of his old life, loss of the princess, loss of the illusion that there was any path that did not involve pain. The princess had been right. There was no escape from suffering, only different shapes of endurance. But endurance itself was a kind of courage. To face each day knowing you are alone, knowing you do not belong, knowing that happiness may never come, and to face it anyway, to continue moving forward. That took a strength he had never credited himself with possessing. The box grew heavy in his hands, as if the weight of his decision was transferring into it. He looked at the red cord, pulsing like a living thing, waiting for him to make his choice. His fingers touched it gently, feeling its texture, silk and something else, something that felt like sea foam or moonlight. Forgive me, Otohime, he whispered to the waves. Forgive me for choosing myself over you. Forgive me for being too afraid, or too brave, or simply too human to join you in your eternal cage. He pulled the cord loose. The knot came undone easily, as if it had been waiting 300 years for this exact moment. The box opened with a soft click, and Urashima braced himself for the smoke, for the aging, for the 300 years to come, crashing down upon him all at once. But nothing happened. The box was empty. The turtle had told the truth. There was nothing inside. No smoke, no magic, no stored time waiting to be released. Just empty space within jade walls, hollow as the yearning that had driven him to the depths in the first place. And yet, something was changing. Urashima felt it immediately. The preservation spell shattering like glass, the protection breaking apart into fragments that dissolved in the dawn air. His body began to shift, to age, not in an instant, but slowly, like time accelerating, making up for what it had lost. His hands wrinkled, the skin becoming papery and spotted with age. His hair, which had remained dark and thick, began to thin and gray and finally turn white. His back curved under weight that had nothing to do with physical burden. His eyes, which had seen wonders in the depths, grew dim with cataracts and the fog of extreme age. His muscles, once strong from rowing, withered to sinew and bone. The transformation took perhaps 5 minutes, but in that time, Urashima lived 300 years of aging compressed into moments. He felt every decade, every year, every day he had been spared in the palace. The spell had not stopped time. It had merely delayed it. And now payment was due, with interest accumulated over centuries. When it was finished, when the last echo of the spell had faded, Urashima was an old man. Ancient beyond ancient, a living relic, a bridge between eras. He should have died. By all rights, his heart should have given out, his organs should have failed. But something kept him alive, perhaps the residue of the princess's kiss, perhaps simple stubbornness, perhaps the narrative itself refusing to release him until his story was complete. He looked down at his aged hands, at the box that had triggered his transformation, and began to laugh. It was a dry, rasping sound, but genuine nonetheless. The princess had given him exactly what she promised, a way to end his suffering. But the ending was not death. It was this: acceptance, understanding, the final loss of any illusion that he could return to what had been or escape into what might be. He was here, now, ancient and out of time and utterly, completely himself. The sun rose fully, painting the beach in gold and amber. Urashima struggled to his feet, his body protesting every movement. The world looked different through eyes that had aged 3 centuries in minutes. Sharper somehow, more precious. Every moment felt borrowed, a gift he had not earned but would not refuse. The old woman appeared, hurrying down the path from the shrine. When she saw him, she stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. "You opened it." "I did. But you're alive. Apparently, I am too stubborn to die properly." He smiled, and despite the wrinkles, despite the age, it was a genuine smile. Or perhaps the story is not done with me yet. She came closer, studying his face with wonder and sadness. "You look like you've lived a dozen lifetimes." "I feel like it too. But here I am, old, displaced, a man who has outlived his own legend. What does one do in such circumstances?" "One lives," she said firmly. "However much time remains, one lives. Come, I will take you to my home. You need food, rest, care. And then, if you are willing, you can tell me stories. Real stories, not the legend. What it was truly like in the Dragon Palace. What the princess was really like. Help me understand. Why would you care about an old man's memories?" "Because they are unique. Because you have seen what no one else has seen. Because your story deserves to be told truly, not just as folklore passed down through generations. And because," she added softly, "everyone deserves kindness, even legends, especially legends." Urashima looked back at the ocean. It was calm this morning, gentle waves lapping at the shore. Somewhere in its depths, Otohime sat on her throne, perhaps sensing that he had made his choice, perhaps already moving forward into the next moment of her endless vigil. He hoped she would not hate him for choosing life, however difficult that life might be. He hoped she would understand. "Will you tell her?" he asked, not sure if he was addressing the old woman or the sea itself. "Will you tell the princess that I am grateful, that I will remember her, that I wish I could have saved her, but I was not strong enough to even save myself?" The waves whispered against the sand, but gave no answer. Perhaps none was needed. Perhaps the princess already knew. The old woman's name was Yuki, which meant snow. She was a widow, her children grown and moved to distant cities, her grandchildren visiting only occasionally. She lived in a small house at the village edge, close enough to be part of the community, but far enough to maintain comfortable distance. In many ways, she understood displacement as well as anyone could. who had not lived 300 years in moments. She took Urashima in without hesitation or expectation of repayment. She gave him a room, simple and clean, with a window overlooking the ocean. She fed him rice and fish and vegetables, simple food that reminded him of his lost past while firmly grounding him in the present. She asked no questions he was unwilling to answer and filled silences with companionable presence rather than empty chatter. Slowly, painfully, Urashima began to adjust to his new existence. His ancient body was frail, prone to aches and tremors, but it worked well enough for basic needs. His mind remained sharp, perhaps sharpened by his experiences, able to navigate the strange new world he found himself in. The language was still difficult. 300 years had changed pronunciation and added new words while archaic terms fell away. But he learned. He had nothing but time now, however much remained to him. The village regarded him with mixed feelings. Some saw him as a blessing, a living connection to their history and legends. They would visit, asking him to tell stories of the old days, of the palace beneath the waves. He obliged when he could, though he found that some memories were too precious or too painful to share. Others saw him as an ill omen, evidence that the boundary between human world and spirit world was thinner than they liked. They avoided his gaze and made protective signs when he passed. Children were fascinated by him. They would dare each other to approach the ancient fisherman, then run away giggling when he looked at them. But gradually, one brave girl, perhaps 7 years old, with eyes like storm clouds, began staying when the others fled. She would sit at a respectful distance and simply watch him. "What is your name?" Urashima asked. "One day." "Hana," she said quietly. "It means flower. A good name. Did you come to hear stories, Hana?" "No. I came because you look lonely. I know what lonely feels like." Something in Urashima's chest tightened. "You are very young to know loneliness. My parents say I am strange, that I see things others don't, that I talk to spirits." She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. "The other children think I'm lying or crazy, but I'm not. I just see differently." Urashima recognized her immediately, recognized the isolation, the sense of being out of step with the world. "I believe you," he said. "I have seen things others cannot see as well. It is a difficult gift to carry." Hana smiled, genuine and bright. After that, she visited him regularly. Not every day, but often enough that he began to look forward to her presence. She would help Yuki with tasks around the house, or sit with him by the window overlooking the sea, or listen when he felt strong enough to share fragments of his story. She never judged, never doubted. She simply accepted him as he was, ancient and strange and displaced. One day, she asked the question he had been dreading. "Do you regret it? Opening the box?" Urashima considered carefully. "I regret that there was no better choice. I regret that the princess remains alone. I regret the 300 years I missed, the people I never knew, the life I might have lived. But do I regret the choice itself?" He paused, watching waves break against distant rocks. "No, I do not regret it, because regret implies wishing I had chosen differently, and I am not sure I could have. This was always the path I was meant to walk, perhaps. Or perhaps I simply tell myself that to make the pain more bearable. The other children say you're going to die soon, that very old people always die soon. They are probably right. This body has lived far longer than any body should. But I am not afraid of dying anymore, Hana. I have already died in every way that matters. Physical death will be almost a relief. Where will you go when you die?" "I don't know. Perhaps to the palace. to serve the princess as her courtier as she planned, perhaps to whatever afterlife awaits humans who have lived too long, perhaps nowhere at all. But wherever I go, I will go having lived, having made choices, having mattered, even in small ways. That is more than many people can say. Hana reached out and took his withered hand in her small one. You matter to me, and to Yuki, and to everyone you tell stories to. That's not small. Urashima felt tears on his cheeks, old man tears, easy to summon, meaningless and meaningful in equal measure. Thank you, little flower. You remind me that kindness exists, even in a world I do not fully understand. Years passed. Not many. Urashima's body was too aged to sustain much more life, but enough for him to make a mark on his new present, however small. He became a fixture in the village, the ancient fisherman who claimed to have visited the Dragon Palace. Some believed him completely. Others thought him a clever fraud or a madman. Most simply accepted him as one of the village's quirks, a living story that added character to their community. He helped where he could, offering advice on fishing when his knowledge happened to align with current practices. He mended nets using techniques his father had taught him, and was surprised to find that some methods transcended time. He told stories to children and adults alike, mixing truth with embellishment, history with legend, until even he was no longer entirely sure where one ended and the other began. Yuki cared for him with patient dedication. As his health deteriorated, she was there, bringing him food when he could no longer walk to the table, reading to him when his eyes grew too weak to see clearly, sitting with him through long nights when sleep would not come. She asked for nothing in return, though he gave what he could: company, conversation, the stories she had asked for when they first met. "Why do you do this?" he asked her one evening. "Care for a stranger, an old man who will never repay your kindness?" "Because someone should," she said simply. "Because you deserve care. Because I am old enough to know that accumulating merit for the next life is less important than showing compassion in this one. And because, Urashima, you are not a stranger anymore. You are family." The word settled over him like a warm blanket. Family. He had not had family since his parents died, since his siblings left, since he became the lonely fisherman on the edge of things. To claim family now, at the end of his life, in a body 300 years too old and a world he did not quite belong to, it was unexpected grace. Hana continued to visit, growing older herself. By the time Urashima's health began its final decline, she was 10, more confident, but still the odd child who saw differently than others. She had started writing, recording the stories he told her in careful characters, preserving them for future generations. "When I grow up," she told him, "I want to write books. Stories about the spirit world and the human world and the places where they touch. I'll write about you if you want. About the real you, not just the legend. Write the truth," he said, "but make it kind. Make it show that even mistakes and pain and impossible choices can lead to something worthwhile. Make it show that loneliness is not the end of the story, only a chapter." "I will," she promised. "I'll make it beautiful." As winter approached, his third winter in this new time, though it felt like both forever and no time at all, Urashima felt his body beginning its final shutdown. His heart beat irregularly. His breathing grew labored. He could no longer walk, could barely sit up. Yuki and Hana took turns sitting with him, keeping vigil, making sure he was not alone. One night, as snow began to fall outside his window, Urashima had a dream. Or perhaps it was not a dream, but something else. A vision, a visitation, a final gift from the depths. He stood in the palace throne room again, young and whole, his body restored to what it had been before the box. Princess Otohime sat on her throne, those nearly invisible threads connecting her to everything, binding her to eternity. She looked at him with infinite sadness and infinite understanding. "You chose to live," she said. "I did. I'm sorry. Don't be. I gave you the choice because I wanted you to choose what was right for you, not what was right for me. If you had opened the box to escape suffering, to return to me out of despair rather than love, it would have meant nothing. You would have been another prisoner in my cage, and I have enough of those already. You're still alone. Yes, I will always be alone. That is my burden, my duty, my fate. But you gave me something, Urashima Taro. You gave me the memory of connection, the knowledge that I can still reach someone, still matter to someone. That memory will sustain me through the centuries ahead. It is enough. It has to be enough. I wish I could have saved you. No one can save me, but you didn't have to. You saw me, truly saw me, not as a princess or a guardian or a function, but as Otohime, a person trapped by circumstances beyond her control. That seeing was its own kind of salvation, however temporary. She stood, and this time the threads stretched without causing her pain. Perhaps in dreams, even her bindings were loosened. She came to him and placed her hand over his heart. Your time in the mortal world ends soon. When it does, you will have another choice. Return to me and serve as my courtier, unchanging and eternal, or move on to whatever awaits humans after death, rebirth, paradise, nothing. I will not trap you again, Urashima. This time, the choice will be yours to make freely, with full knowledge. What would you prefer? I would prefer you stay with me. I will not lie, but I prefer even more that you choose what brings you peace. You have earned that much. The dream faded. Urashima woke in his small room, Yuki dozing in a chair beside his bed, Hana curled up on the floor wrapped in blankets. His family, he thought. His strange, impossible family, at the end of a strange, impossible life. He smiled. The pain was less now. Everything was less, receding like the tide, pulling back to reveal the beach underneath. He felt light, untethered, ready to move on to whatever came next. "Thank you," he whispered to no one and everyone, to Yuki and Hana, to the princess in her palace, to his long-dead parents, to the sea that had called him, to the turtle that had carried him, to every moment of joy and suffering that had made his life what it was. The snow continued to fall, silent and soft, covering the world in white. Urashima closed his eyes and let himself drift, knowing that when he woke, if he woke, he would have one final choice to make. But for now, in this moment between life and whatever came after, he was at peace. The fisherman Urashima Taro died on the first day of winter, 3 years after returning from the Dragon Palace. Yuki found him in the morning, his face peaceful, his body finally released from the burden of 300 years, compressed into moments. She wept, not from shock, but from the simple sorrow of losing someone who had become dear to her. The village buried him on the beach where he had first opened the box, where he had aged centuries in minutes, where he had chosen life over death and endurance over escape. They placed a marker beside the shrine they had built 300 years ago, creating a strange doubling, memorial and memorial, legend and truth side by side. Hana, now 10 years old and determined, began writing his story, not the folklore version, but the real one as he had told it to her. She wrote of his loneliness and yearning. She wrote of the princess and her terrible duty. She wrote of the choice he made and the years that followed. She wrote it all with care and compassion, preserving it for generations yet to come. But what she could not write, what she could only sense with the strange sight that made other children avoid her, was what happened after. The moment when Urashima's spirit, freed from his aged body, stood once more at a crossroads. When the depths called to him again, offering eternal service to the princess, companionship in that timeless realm. When the other path beckoned, release, rest, whatever awaited beyond death's threshold. Hana could not see which path he chose. But sometimes, when she visited his grave, she thought she heard something beneath the waves. Not quite laughter, not quite sorrow, but something that might have been satisfaction. The sound of someone who had lived fully, who had suffered and endured, who had mattered in his own small way. And in the depths, in the palace of coral and pearl, Princess Otohime sat on her throne and smiled. Whether because a new courtier had joined her eternal court, or because she felt Urashima's spirit pass on to peace, or simply because the memory of their time together still warmed her through the cold centuries, no one could say. The sea keeps its secrets, but it remembers. It always remembers.